At the New Jersey SBDC Network, our mission is simple: to help businesses grow and succeed. Our consulting, training, and information services make it easier for businesses to reach their potential. Whether you're currently in operation or just starting out, we have the right tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. Visit us online to get started on your path to success today.
So a pleasant good morning to everyone. My name is Takoa Bell. I am an event coordinator here at NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on behalf of Dr. Tendai Ndoro, the regional director, I would like to welcome you to our Exploring Business Ownership Through Franchising webinar. For those of you here that are unfamiliar with the SBDC, it stands for Small Business Development Centers. And here at the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers at Rutgers-Newark, we serve as the premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to established small businesses, startups, and as well as to entrepreneurs. We are 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, and we service those in Essex County. Our center here is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and is funded through a public-private partnership agreement between the Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Now, our mission here is to help entrepreneurs as well as business owners start and grow sustainable, successful businesses through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. Now, these services are provided to you at no cost and are paid for by your tax dollars. If you or your business is located in Essex County, our website is www.rnsbdc.com, where you can request counseling. On the top right-hand corner of our website, there's a button labeled Request Counseling. Clicking on that button will lead you to fill out information, including the help you are seeking for your business. And within 24 to 48 hours, a consultant will reach out to you for an assessment. And for those of you that are not in Essex County, our other website is www.njsbdc.com. On this website, you can type in your county and it will refer you to your local SBDC office. For the benefit of everyone attending today's webinar, your audio has been muted and we will be taking questions via the Q&A feature here on Zoom or the chat feature. We do recommend the Q&A feature because it'll help us to remain organized and have the questions and answers in one designated area. So please feel free to post your questions and we will do our best to respond during or at the end of the webinar. I also want to let you know that a copy of the presentation slides along with a video recording of this webinar will be emailed to you within 48 to 72 business hours. So you can refer to this information long after the end of this webinar. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter for today's presentation, Boynton Weeks. Boynton is a partner of NJSBDC and at FranNet of NJ and NY. His expertise lies in franchising. Now, without further ado, I will turn today's presentation over to Boynton.
All right, Takoa, that was a great intro. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, just bear with me while I share my screen. Okay, can you guys see that? Takoa, can you see my screen?
We can see it, yes.
All right, awesome. Well, listen, everybody, welcome. Welcome to our franchising webinar this morning. Looks like we have, I don't know, a little over a handful of attendees. So as Takoa mentioned, my name is Boynton Weeks, and I'm going to bring to you today about a little over 20 years of franchising experience, both on the franchisee and on the franchisor side. So I've got a little bit of knowledge and information in this space. And, you know, folks, since we have a pretty small audience, If you want to make this interactive, to Takoa's point, put your questions in there. We'll recognize the questions as we go. No such thing as a dumb question or a silly question, right? I, like many of you, I worked in corporate America for 13 years before I bought my first business in 2001. And so I can remember not too long ago starting out with very limited knowledge. So certainly the resources that I'm going to provide, and certainly combined with the folks at the SBDC, use this opportunity to learn and grow and get all the information. So in addition to my franchising work, I also run a youth mentoring group in Trenton, New Jersey, where I mentor young men between the ages of 8 and 18. And I am a proud graduate of Fairleigh Dickinson University. A little bit about our agenda today. We cannot reasonably talk about business ownership today, in today's environment, without acknowledging the elephant in the room, right? So COVID-19, we'll touch base on a little bit about that and how that's impacting business ownership. We're going to talk about why, right? As I sit down with all my clients, I try to get them to develop a compelling why. I've interviewed hundreds of business owners over the years, and the one common thread was they all had a compelling and sustainable why. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. When you're thinking about business ownership, you can do it 3 ways primarily, right? You can start your own business, you could buy a franchise, or you could buy an existing business, which we sell those as well. There's risk and rewards in any entrepreneurial venture, be it the stock market, and we've certainly seen that this past week. And we're going to talk about some common myths associated with franchising, and then talk about at FranNet how we can help you to identify the best business options for you. So who is FranNet? We are a 32-year-old international franchise consulting company. 99% of the people that attend these webinars or my seminars in person, when we used to do those, had never heard of FranNet, and we're very comfortable with that. But what we do is we help people to figure out what is the best fit in business ownership for them, as well as to help them decide, quite frankly, if business ownership is even within what they should be doing today. And we'll talk about how we help you do that. So we've been doing this for about 32 years. We have an assessment tool that we use, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end. And if you want to take the assessment, it doesn't cost you any money. As you can see, this is a no-cost proposition for you. What we do is we work with you, and I represent about 220 different franchise concepts, from damage restoration to residential cleaning to quick service restaurants, right? We cover the gamut. If you think about the franchise space, there's about 3,600 franchises out there. So most of my clients who are thinking about business ownership simply don't know where to start. So usually a good place is to take the assessment. At the end, you're going to see a QR code, and I'm going to leave it on the screen. And then you can take your camera on your phone, unless it's one of those flip phones, but I doubt that anybody has those anymore. And you can just scan the QR code, and it will ask you a series of questions, get your contact information. And if you want to complete the assessment, it'll automatically email the assessment to you. We have these tremendous partnerships with the Small Business Development Centers, Tendai and Takoa and their team. We're also partners with the SBA, Association of Women's Business Centers, as well as SCORE. So we're pretty well connected. What is the benefit of working with a franchise consultant like myself? As I stated, there's no cost. There's 3,600 franchises out there, and we're going to help to educate you on opportunities in business ownership. We're going to make sure you have choices so that you can make the best, most informed decision for you and your family. Let me say this: 7 out of 10 people that I meet with don't buy a business today. 70% don't. Part of that process and my job is to help you figure out if it's right for you or not. And if it's not, because we've taken you to that fork in the road, then that's okay today, because many of my clients come back 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. This is our client bill of rights. We're one of the only franchise consulting companies that has a client bill of rights. And so I'm not going to read this. You're going to get a copy of the presentation. You can read it, and you can begin to understand on your own what it is we're going to do for you and our commitment to helping you to get to that fork in the road. COVID-19 having tremendous effects on our economy, correct? Business are shuttered, fitness centers were closed, hotels, restaurants, 25% capacity, 50% capacity, right? This has had a tremendous impact on our economy and will continue to for the not too distant future, right? Listen, we're optimistic that the vaccines will help to bring us back to a sense of normalcy. But the reality for you is, if you're thinking about business ownership today, you have to contemplate what is the risk associated with starting a business today. And also, quite frankly, the flip side, what are some of the opportunities? And we're going to talk about that. So we've been here before. It's certainly not my first rodeo. When I bought my first business, coincidentally, was a hair care franchise back in July of 2001. We all know what happened right after that, right? We had 9/11, 2 months later. We had the tech bubble, the dot-com bust. And then in 2008, we had the subprime, mortgage meltdown, otherwise known as the Great Recession, right? So I've personally lived through the franchise industry in previous downturns, right? Previous recessions. And currently we're going through one now. Is this different? Absolutely, right? I call this a recession or a downturn with a twist, right? Because this one comes complete with a healthcare component that the others did not. And so certainly this one's different. And we've had to literally pivot and look at how and what sorts of businesses we're still thriving despite the pandemic. So, one of the things we're advising our clients to do is look at recession-resistant businesses, right? I don't think, if you were to ask me the question, are there any recession-proof businesses out there? I don't necessarily think that exists. But there are some good low-cost, lower overhead, home-based service-type businesses. Think damage restoration, think businesses like residential cleaning. That is a $6 billion industry experiencing somewhere around 6.6% year-over-year growth, and has continued to even thrive despite the pandemic. This might surprise you. This was a survey done recently by a company called Franchise Insights. And 54% of the respondents actually think that now is a good time to start a business. Nearly 60% expect to start a business within the next 3 months. 40% believe that business conditions will improve in 3 months or so. I think a lot of that is probably tied to the fact that nearly 30 million people have now been, vaccinated. And of course, the new administration is touting somewhere around 125 to 150 million people will be vaccinated within the first 100 days of this administration. So I think a lot of these factors are creating a sense of optimism, and more of my clients now who were a little paralyzed a few months ago are feeling better about things. If I were to take my clients and break them out into, percentage, right? 20% of them probably have absolutely hit the brakes. They're paralyzed. Their dreams and aspirations of business ownership were tremendously affected and impacted by the pandemic. And I certainly understand that. 60% of them are probably in the middle. They understand that while things are different right now, that now is still a good time to conduct due diligence. It's still a good time to consider all of their options. And they also recognize that conducting due diligence and research doesn't commit to, the acquisition or the purchase. So that's about 60%. And then they have another 20% who were full speed ahead, right? They had lived through other downturns, other recessions, and they understand that there are opportunities that are abound today, which were not there a year ago. If you think about our unemployment rate is unfortunately very, very high today, right? So what does that mean from a business ownership standpoint? Well, there's more people out there looking for jobs, right? So the labor pool is greater today. If you're thinking about borrowing money, well, the banks are lending the money today at an all-time low. So the interest rates are very, very affordable. And then if you think about, and here's another unfortunate outcome as a result of the pandemic, right? But as I alluded to earlier, many businesses have shuttered their doors. So when businesses close, landlords and banks are faced with the immediate need to get another tenant into that space. So what we're seeing from a real estate perspective is there's more real estate to choose from, first of all, but the terms of the lease agreement is becoming more favorable to the tenant than it was even a year ago. So for the opportunists, which are about 20% of my clients, they see this as a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous time to start a business. So in my opening comments, I talked a little bit about why, right? And why are you thinking about business ownership? You're on this call today because it's in the back of your mind, right? Or maybe it was a New Year's resolution, right? It's a new year, a new beginning. I want to start a business. Well, I often spend an inordinate amount of time with my clients and just say, well, why do you want to own a business? Business ownership is very difficult. It's wrought with challenges. It can bring about a lot of stress and sleepless nights, right? And I don't say this to scare you, it's just the reality. So, one of the ways in which you can move through that is by developing your compelling and sustainable why, right? So, I just listed some examples here. Well, and these are common things that clients have said to me over the years when I say, well, why do you want to own a business? Well, I want more control over my life, right? I've been downsized 3 times or 4 times, and I want to just control my destiny, right? Maybe it's flexibility and or independence, right? When I think back to 25 years ago when I started thinking about business ownership, it was really because of flexibility, independence, and control. At the time I had a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter. My wife at the time was a stay-at-home mom with a beautiful home on the east end of Long Island. And I had what all of my family members and friends thought was success. Great job, money, stock options, all that stuff. But I really wasn't happy. And I wasn't happy because the more my company said that I had to travel and be away from my kids, the less content I was with working for someone else. So I built a sustaining and compelling why around that. So as you sit today for the next 45 minutes or so, and if you haven't started, putting pen to paper and developing your why, you should start to do that. The reality is the days are gone, right? And many of you on here may not even remember it, but there was a time when you could go to work, spend 30, 35, 40 years with the same company, retire with the same company, get a gold watch and a pat on the back, right? Those days did exist. And the reality is, and as many of you know, it doesn't always work that way today. Fact of the matter is, your path to retirement today probably looks a little bit more like this visual depiction, right? Layoffs, leave one employer, go and work somewhere else, start from the bottom, work your way up, detours, re-engineering, downsizing, right sizing, whatever the term is, right? The fact of the matter is the path to retirement is not that linear trajectory that our parents and grandparents were accustomed to. So one of the ways we get around it is potentially business ownership. Now, you might be thinking, and I said it earlier, and it's reality, there's risk associated with any entrepreneurial endeavor, right? And certainly there's risk with regard to business ownership. And these are just some common things that I hear. Well, Boynton, I don't have the knowledge. I don't know where to start. There's 3,600 franchises out there. I go on Google and I Google a franchise and all of this other stuff pops up. It becomes overwhelming, right? Where do I start? How do I find the right business opportunity? How much money is it going to take me to get started? How long before I get to break even? How long before I get to profitability, right? Do I have the talent to run a business, right? So I get all of that, and that's all very, very real. And that's one of the things we try to work with you to help you understand. So when we think about business ownership, and it's even more important today, one of the things we try to do is break it out in buckets, right? First thing is, hey, how can we minimize that risk that I was just referring to, right? One way is to try to identify a business that is recession resistant, and they do exist. And then from that platform, we can kind of break it out. So I gave some 3 buckets here, right? And so we can look at certain businesses that are driven by demographics, right? Let's just start there. So if you think about, the senior care, healthcare sector, right? There's 50,000 baby boomers retiring every day, right? The number of people turning 65 is projected to double in the next 10 years. So if one of the fundamental attributes of your business is based around demographics, well, that space is doing well today, even despite the pandemic, and is projected to do well into the future. Think of small businesses like providing in-home non-medical care for maybe people that have dementia, Alzheimer's care, or families who have aging parents or grandparents who may need to have services that involve them leaving the home and seeking services in assisted living centers and things like that. So a lot of those businesses were doing well before COVID-19 and are projected to do well into the future. Think residential repairs, home modifications. I saw a study by the Harvard Business Journal 2019, and it estimated that on average 26 million homeowners undergo some sort of home improvements every year, right? So also combine that with the fact that that same baby boomer demographic that we were talking about, they used to do the repairs themselves, right? But as they've gotten older, they outsource that or hire someone to do it on their behalf. When we look at the millennials, well, in many cases, they don't have the talent nor the desire to do it. They'd rather have someone do it. Look at pet care. Who would have thought pet care would be the industry that it has become? You can look at 80 million households in the United States have at least one pet. Right, that's staggering, right? It's a $70 billion industry. You drive around now and you see the doggy daycares, right? Somehow my neighbor, we have a 10-year-old Yorkie, and somehow my neighbor convinced my wife that we needed to, put our dog in a daycare twice a week because he needs to be around other dogs and, he needs to go through some sort of socialization process. I grew up and we had many dogs and there was no doggy daycare, they lived in the backyard, right? So this has become a tremendous industry, right? Think about essential services. That's another bucket, right? Look at automotive, possibly not the sexiest of businesses out there, right? But there are 300 million cars on the road in the United States today. The average age of the car is somewhere around 11 and a half, 12 years old. So people are holding on to their car longer. When it breaks down, it needs to be repaired by a reputable franchise or business. Think about damage restoration. Probably would never think of damage restoration as, oh my God, that's that business that I want to own. Well, fact of the matter is, it's an essential service. We're working from home today. Maybe you're watching a little bit more television than you've ever watched before. Look at all of the insurance commercials, Geico, Progressive, right? Liberty Mutual, Emu to Emu, right? Insurance companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year to acquire policyholders. So when their policyholders have a loss as a result of water, fire, floods, natural disasters, whatever it is, their policyholders need to be made whole quickly and efficiently, right? And another nice part about this particular business segment that people overlook is, as the business owner, you get paid directly by the insurance company. So you're not waiting on the money. And again, I just threw pet care and essential services bucket as well. And then think about, businesses that help other small businesses stay afloat, right? Think of New Jersey. We've got, 260,000 or so businesses. 90% of them are small businesses. So they may outsource things like sales training or, training for, digital and, marketing and advertising and things like that. So, maybe your skill set is in information technologies, right? So many small businesses usually don't have an in-house IT company, right? So when they have issues with their information technology, and that's not going anywhere, that's becoming more and more, small businesses are becoming more and more reliant on that. If that's an area of interest for you, it's a great business today. And again, not going anywhere in the near future. I'm going to pause here and just take a look and ask Takoa. Are there any questions in the chat? I don't think I see anything.
No, I don't see any questions in the chat as of yet.
Okay. Are there any questions from the group? Nothing hearing.
No, I don't see anything.
All right, we'll keep going.
Okay.
So again, other considerations, listen, as I stated, senior citizens will still need care, cars will still need to be maintained. Children will need tutoring services. I sit on a board for a charter school in Trenton called Village Charter. And, one of the things we lose a little sleep at night over is these kids are learning in a virtual environment. Many of them will get passed on to the next grade. But did they really learn what they needed to learn during this time that is preparing them for the next grade level, right? So think, Mathnasium, Kumon, Huntington Learning Center, best in class. These tutoring franchises are doing amazing and will continue to do amazing. And oh, by the way, bugs aren't going anywhere. So let's talk about business ownership really quick. So as I stated in the outset, 3 ways to go into business primarily. Start a business from scratch, buy an existing business, and buy a franchise. All 3 have pros and cons. We'll explore a couple of those just briefly. So thinking about starting a business from scratch, right? It's your idea, it's your dream, your passion. You have total control and you make all the decisions. You are the king and the queen of your business, right? Nobody's going to tell you how to do it, and there's no rules, right? No predetermined rules. You're building it from your passion. And that's great on one hand and certainly works. But some of the disadvantages that you need to think about if you're thinking about starting a business from scratch is, you're going to create all the systems, right? You're going to figure out how you're going to get your product or service from, one facility to your customers' hands, right? How are you going to do that? who is your customer? What are the demographics of your customer base, right? You've got to figure that out. And as a result of it, the reality is, folks, that banks aren't necessarily in the business of taking risk, right? Although they say they are. And so, there are going to be limited financial options because there's no playbook necessarily that they can, review and say, oh, this is a good business to lend money to, right? And so as a result, and consequently, there's usually going to be a little bit of a slower ramp up. And we know from SBA data that there's a higher failure rate associated with starting a business from scratch. You can certainly buy an existing business. One of the first questions I ask my clients is, how soon do you need to see the cash? If their burn rate is really high and they need to see money within, 3 to 6 months, then usually, considering a resale might be to their advantage, right? What's good about it? Well, there's going to be actual financial results that you're going to have an opportunity to pour through, right? There's going to be 3 years of tax returns and financial statements and things like that. There's going to be an established market, employees, customer base. The systems are all in place for you, right? It's a great opportunity if you can afford it. A nice strategy to use if you're thinking about buying an existing business and you don't want to put up all of the capital. You can utilize a technique called owner or seller financing. You may hear it called seller financing as well. And that's where the owner, depending on how aggressive they are to sell the business to you, may in fact agree to hold some of the paper for a period of time, maybe a year, or 2 years, or 3 years, whatever the agreement is, right? And so that lowers the amount of money you're putting in up front. And the other benefit of that is if the owner still has, part ownership technically in the business because you didn't buy it outright, if you're facing an issue with employees or customers or whatever it is, you can call that owner and he's likely to pick up the phone, right, and assist you with it because he wants to get the full balance of, the sales price. But there's some disadvantages to buying a resale as well. And probably the biggest, I'm not going to go through the entire list, is, hidden seller motives, right? Did you really understand and have a clear picture as to why that owner is selling that business? I'll give you an example. So let's say, I own an Ace hardware store and you're interested in buying it. The numbers look good. You like the way the business was run, great customer service. The employees are always happy. But I may know or have an inside, some intel on the fact that Home Depot and Lowe's are coming to town in 2 to 3 years, right? And I may not tell you that. So there's not always something nefarious like that goes on with regard to buying a resale, but you have to ask the proper questions, right? You can buy a franchise, right? Think of advantages such as there's a proven business system. There's going to be training and support. I often tell my clients, don't fall in love with the product. Product's important, but don't fall in love with that. You need to fall in love with the playbook, right? And that's all of the business, the marketing, the real estate, the operations, and the training. Those are the things that are going to propel your business to success, right? But yet, listen, there's some disadvantages to buying a franchise as well. There's going to be a structured operating system. You walk into a franchise, they usually look, smell, seem to all be the same, right? And that's by design. It's part of the branding process. But for some people, that structured operating process and system may not be for them, right? You can only operate in your territory. You cannot cannibalize someone else's territory. And you can only sell, their products and services, right? And probably the biggest downside that I hear from my clients is, most people dread the thought of paying royalty payments. And in any good franchise system, there's going to be ongoing royalties. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So what is franchising? It's the creation of a distribution channel to build brand identity and attain market dominance quickly. Franchising's been around since the late 1800s. And what is it? It's a license to use, right? Their products, services, names, trademarks, the playbook, as I talked about, right? In exchange for paying the royalties, whether it's the initial franchise fee and the ongoing royalties. Franchising is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission and has been, folks, since 1979. If you've ever bought, and I'll give you an example, if you've ever bought stock, right, in a company, it usually comes with something called a prospectus, right, which outlines the performance of that stock, that bond, whatever it is, and sort of outlines sort of the risk for you. Well, same thing in the franchising world. It's regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, and it's broken out into all of these, what we call items, right? And it's about 23 items that make up a franchise disclosure document. And this is a legal document that I usually encourage all of my clients before you even invest in a franchise, because as I said earlier, even if the franchise is still risk associated with it, you want to have a franchise attorney review this document with you and on your behalf. You need to understand it. But, listen, you're going to see things in there like in item 3, litigation. If you look at the franchise disclosure document, which the franchisor, by the way, is required to give you, and you see a lot of litigation in there, or any litigation at all between the franchisees and the franchisor, that might be something for you to look a little more closely at, right? Again, what we're trying to do is what we call risk mitigation. Who owns the business? That's going to be outlined in item 2. What is their business experience in this particular space, be it fitness or automotive, right? What are all of the fees that are going to come with the acquisition of this type of business, right? And these documents, folks, are required to be updated annually. So it's going to include current data. It's also going to include things like in item 20, where it says list of outlets. And that's very, very important, folks, because that's going to show you a list of every franchisee in the system, as well as their phone number. Why might that be important? Because you're going to have an opportunity to use that information to talk to those franchisees. We call this validation in the franchise space. And you're going to ask them questions like, how long have you been doing it? Is the franchisor support what they said it would be? Are you happy with the training? And ultimately, right, what we really want to know is, are you making money, right? Regarding the making money piece, I want to direct your attention to something in item 19 called a financial performance representation. You'll also hear this referred to as literally in item 19. And that's where by law, the franchisor can share some information with you about how much money you can reasonably expect to make if you were to own and operate this particular franchise. So that's all fine and well, but folks, do not rely solely on that. You need to take that information and then, as I stated earlier, overlay that information with what you're hearing when you're talking to the franchisees in the validation process, right? So it's just one indicator, one potential risk mitigator, but you need to validate it in the end. There's also going to be financial statements, which are audited financial statements for the last 3 years. And why might that be important to you? When you purchase a franchise, most franchise agreements are for anywhere from 7 to 10 years. So it's important that franchisor be on strong financial footing, right? So that they are there and able to provide training and support for you for the life of that agreement. So as I talked about earlier, validation is a critical risk mitigator in the due diligence and selection process, right? And I'm generally advising my clients to speak to no less than 10 existing franchisees. So whether you're working with me or not, and you're investigating franchising on your own, I encourage you, make the phone calls, ask the questions, right? Ask the right questions so that you can potentially make the right decision for you and your family. So let's talk about some common myths associated with franchising. Franchising is only fast food and retail. And I'm sure you're thinking that, right? Because we are inundated with McDonald's and Burger King and Shake Shack and Chipotle commercials every day, right? And then the fact of the matter is, folks, that if you add up, and here's a little chart for you. If you look here, 5% of the franchises are full service and 20% are QSRs, right? So 25% of the 3,600 franchises out there comprise food-related concepts. Somehow my watch was thinking I was working out or something. Myth number 2, franchises succeed because of the quality of the product. Fact of the matter is, folks, that is a small part of the equation. Listen, Kentucky Fried Chicken's not bad. It's not as good as mine. McDonald's, the burgers are good, not as good as mine. Pizza Hut, well, they may have me beat, right? But the point of this slide, folks, is this. And I said it twice already, and I'm going to say it again, the third time. It's the playbook. You know, it's where you setting up your shop, right? What analysis went into the real estate selection process, right? Demographics, psychographics. What sort of, pre-opening marketing campaigns did you put in place to ensure your grand opening success, right? What sort of training for not only for you, but your employees upon their hiring? What sort of training did they receive? I mean, look at a place like Chick-fil-A as an example. I've never gone into a Chick-fil-A and had bad customer service because it's part of their playbook. Myth number 3, successful franchises emerge in new industries with no new competitors. Fact of the matter is, folks, successful franchise opportunities are established from well-established industries, right? And so think about hair care. You may have heard of companies like Supercuts, Great Clips in the franchise realm. But when they came on the scene in the 80s, there was a barbershop on every corner, right? So, franchises do not enter segments where there is no competition. High return requires a high investment. And I thought that 20 years ago as well. And the fact of the matter is, there's no automatic correlation between the cost of the franchise and the potential return. There are many lower cost home-based service franchises that generate significant income without investing $1 million. Franchises are expensive. That's a relative thing. But the fact of the matter is, and again, here's a little pie chart for you. 27% of the 3,600 franchises out there cost under $100,000. 55% of them cost under $250,000. So you don't need to think that you need $1 million or $2 million or $3 million to buy a successful franchise business. Many of them, 55% of them, are under $250,000. So how does the funding work with regard to buying a franchise? If the business you're looking at acquiring or purchasing, again, after much due diligence, let's say the number is $100,000. In your mind, you ought to be thinking, I need to have 25 to 30% of that liquid. And then the lenders that we work with here at FriendNet that we would put you in contact with, and certainly working with the SBDC as well, they will fund the balance of the 70 and 75%, subject to, listen, you got to have a credit score somewhere around 680. That's kind of the line of demarcation, right? So at least a 680 credit score, home ownership is good, but you certainly have to have the equity injection of the 25 to 30% of the total number of the investment. The money can come from personal savings. If you have a rich uncle or aunt that's willing to fund a part of that business for you, that would be great. Home equity lines of credit are popular today. Again, we talked about seller financing earlier. You could even use, and many of my clients aren't even aware of this, but there's something called a ROBS program, rollover as business startups, where you can legally take money from your previous employer's 401k. So it has to be a previous employer. You can roll that money over into a subchapter C corporation and use that money to fund your business. And the benefit of that is you can take that money out and not pay the early withdrawal, the 10% early withdrawal fee, and avoid the income tax on the money you're rolling over to fund your business. So probably 50% of my clients use a rollover to fund parts or all of their business. So something to think about. Industry experience is required. That is a myth. The reality is that franchisors are looking for people with strong business skills. Not necessarily, I'll give you an example. If you were thinking of purchasing a Mako or a Meineke franchise, right, in the automotive space, and you were a auto mechanic, that probably would not be a good fit for the franchisor, because they want you to have good communication skills, business skills, and not necessarily working in the business, but they want you working on the business, marketing, advertising, hiring, managing the staff. So think about, folks, what are your transferable skills? What is it that you did prior to this business venture? And does that transfer well with what that franchise or business operation is looking for? Two sorts of business formats if you're thinking about franchising, two primary anyway. There's the owner-operator model, right? Think of, residential cleaning, commercial cleaning, home improvement services. Those are typically, what we call the man in a van, right? Chuck in a truck sort of business, right? They usually require that you work that business full-time and not have another full-time job. And then there's what we call semi-absentee, or I like to call it the semi-passive models, right? Think of, hair care franchises. Think of these, these lash lounges. Think Massage Envy, right? Massage Envy probably has 1,000 units, million customers worldwide. You will rarely ever walk into a Massage Envy franchise and see the owner or the franchisee doing massages, right? Semi-absentee models are usually designed for people that have a full-time job. They hire a manager, call it executive manager positions, right? And they hire the manager to run the business on a day-to-day operation. So I'm going to give you a couple more examples: hair, beauty, fitness, and wellness. Typical segments that are usually going to be semi-absentee models. The nice part about it is you can usually keep the benefit of a full-time paycheck while you're building a business, and then you stay in your full-time occupation long enough to get your business to revenue to a point where you could comfortably, use it as an exit from corporate America. Here's the downside, folks, right? Whenever you're talking about real estate, particularly here in New Jersey, semi-absentee businesses are usually real estate based. And so as a result, the investment is going to go up, usually starting somewhere around $250,000 and up for any semi-absentee or semi-passive business model. We talked about royalty payments earlier. I'm going to leave that in. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Fact of the matter is royalties are a trade-off, right? You're exchanging some profits in the long term for risk reduction in the short term. We know that most small businesses fail in the first 2 to 3 years. So things to consider as you're trying to find the perfect franchise. Are you willing to follow the franchisor's system? That's critical, folks. If you're sort of, maybe renegade is not the right word, but if you're not willing to take someone else's idea, clone it, and make it yours, you would probably fail in the franchise system, right? They want you to take the system as designed and put it in place in your market. Does it fit into your financial, comfort zone, right? Is it affordable for you? Again, is the risk level tolerable to you? And at the end of the day, will you enjoy it? Whether you're thinking about business ownership or not, I want you to do this. Take some time to write down what are your unbreakable and non-negotiable demands for the business, right? I'll give you an example, right? I had a client 2.5 years ago, and he came to me. He owned a 18,000 square foot indoor children's play center. And he said, well, Boynton, my business is super busy from, October through March into April. And then when the weather breaks, all the parents take their kids to the park and they play outside and they go to camps. So his business revenue goes way down in the summer months. And he said, well, how can I buy another business that would supplement the downturn in my revenue in the summer? And so what he wanted was a business, and this was unbreakable and non-negotiable for him, that he could build and run that was a seasonal sort of business. And we ended up with a outdoor pest control company that does most of its revenue from, usually from March through September. Now, here's what was good about this particular client. We didn't know the pandemic was coming. And so he ended up buying the outdoor pest control franchise, built it, grew it very successfully. And when the pandemic hit, his indoor play center ended up closing, and now it's closed permanently. So, but write down things like, okay, is it a seasonal business? Do you want something with high demand? Maybe you want something that's Amazon proof. We understand what Amazon's doing to many small businesses, right? Literally putting them out of business. Do you want a business where your product or service can't be shipped or outsourced overseas, right? So start to write those sorts of things down and then use that as your guide as you're, going through the due diligence process. Again, what are your transferable skills? Are you good at customer service? Is your background staffing and financial management? Were you a strong operations and management person in your corporate days? Or maybe you were, strong in sales, right? And then use those things to sort of develop what we call your personal business model. And this is where we walk you through the little things that I think, many people don't contemplate when they're buying or purchasing a business, right? How many employees do you want? Do you want a business that's going to evolve to 75 to 100 employees, right? Think about, these non-medical staffing franchises, right? Well, some of them have 75 to 100 employees. Is that what you want? right? If you have a residential cleaning business or a commercial cleaning business, many of your employees are going to be blue collar workers, right? Many may not have the strong command of the English language even, right? So you got to kind of contemplate all of these things. Who are the people that you're going to manage? Do you want one, none, or do you want that to be plentiful? What sort of business environment do you want? Do you want something on Main Street, semi-absentee model, retail? We know it's going to cost you a little bit more money. Or do you want to work from the comfort of your home, right? We've been saddled with this pandemic. The landscape has changed in terms of our work environment, right? So maybe you've gotten accustomed to, working from home. And so maybe that becomes one of your, non-negotiable, unbreakable items. How many hours do you want to work? If you're thinking about a B2B business, well, those are nice, right? Because that's not going to require you to work nights or weekends. Think of a company like Fast Signs, right? That's usually a business-to-business sort of franchise. What sort of customers do you want? Do you want it to be B2B or B2C, right? All of these factors, while it seems basic, we're going to walk you through each item to help you understand how to build that business model. I talked to you earlier about the personal franchise assessment, right? It takes you about 30 minutes to complete online. And it's going to help you to, really clarify and validate, right? Your why, and then sort of the right business fit for you, be it automotive, fitness, hair care, whatever it is. Here's a couple statistics that I'll leave you with, and we're going to be winding down in a minute. After 2 years, 64% of businesses are still open. This is SBA data. After 5 years, 50% of businesses are still open. So what we do at Frannet is we track some of this data and we say, well, the businesses that we've worked with, the clients that we've worked with, after 2 years, 91% of them are still in business as opposed to 64%. And after 5 years, 85% are still in business as opposed to 50%. Why is that? It's because we're taking the time to help you get to the fork in the road where maybe 70% of my clients are a no today, but that might have been the best no for them. For the 30% that it's a yes, they're usually successful and in business 85% of the time after 5 years, because we've spent time developing the due diligence process, mitigating the risk, and making sure and trying to ensure that they made the best decision for them and their family. Thinking about business ownership, make sure you have the right team, right? Franchise attorney, which I work with, lender relationships, banks, having a strong accountant on your team. All of these things matter. If you're into reading like me, which I am, and hopefully you are, a book that I give to all of my clients, Street Smart Franchising, is an excellent book written by Joe Matthews. It's a great read because it's the type of thing where you don't have to read it cover to cover. I love those types of books, but you can dial in and zero in on whatever is on your mind that day with regard to the due diligence process. So I would highly encourage Street Smart Franchising, and also the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, which talks about working on the business but not necessarily in it. Here's my contact information, office number, cell number, my favorite motto. If it's the B, it's up to me. I own it, I control it. There is my email address, and I'm gonna pull up for you really quick. This is the QR code. So if you take out that handy cell phone of yours, and you hold it up to the QR code, you should get a menu of items to select from, including whether or not you want to take the personal franchise assessment, which I stated takes about 30 minutes. I still don't see any questions in the Q&A. Do you, Takoa?
Yes, there's one question in the chat from Janelle.
Oh, okay, Janelle. Hi, Janelle.
So she's asking, what are some examples of home-based franchises?
Yep, so the outdoor, great question. So the outdoor pest control franchise that I alluded to earlier is a perfect example of a home-based franchise. Many of the residential cleaning franchises start out of their home and eventually scale to a small office. A lot of the residential repair franchises start out of their home and expand to small offices. It's a tremendous amount of opportunities in the home-based space, service-oriented franchises, and many of them are well under the $100,000 threshold.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. Feel free to ask your questions, everyone. Take advantage of this time.
11:01, we did it in exactly an hour.
So we do have time for questions.
No such thing as a silly question, guys.
No more questions, going once.
Going twice.
Okay, so I just want to thank you, Boynton, for that information, and for your presentation and for your time today.
Awesome.
Before we wrap up, let me just redirect you all to the chat for 1 second. I am posting some of our upcoming events, the link to our Eventbrite page, as well as the link to our website so that you can register for events, or you can also request counseling if you are looking for more information on franchising as well. So let me just share my screen for a second. Okay, so we are hosting another webinar directly after this one at 12 o'clock called Taking Control of Your Company Finances webinar. So if you are interested in finding out what your company finances are telling you, feel free to register for that one as well. Again, that webinar is right after this one at 12 p.m. and registration.
Can I join?
Yeah, of course. Registration closes at 11:45 a.m. I also want to remind you all that you will be receiving a video replay as well as the presentation slides in 24 to 48 hours. So you can always refer back to this information in the future. After this webinar in the browser, you will see a survey pop up. I would really appreciate it if you could just take a few minutes to complete that. It'll really help us to adjust our presentations as well as give us some information on what kind of assistance you're needing. So if you have time to complete that, your feedback is much appreciated. And on that note, we will now end this webinar. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to attend, to participate. I also want to thank you again, Boynton, for your time. And we look forward to seeing you all at our future webinars. So have a great day, everyone.
Good luck, everybody. Stay safe, wear your mask.
Thank you.